we'll go make a salmon trip, or we'll go make a albacore trip. We have to take a year.
Get back in session.
I worked with Marine Resources for years. They're really good program.
Look at that. Would you like half?
They work hard. They listen to everybody, and then when they have to make a decision.
Okay, I've been asked by several members of the audience to ensure that we position the mic closer to our mouths when we speak so that all members of the audience can hear us. So is this audible in the back? State Police here? Can you see? Okay. All right. Exhibit A, Commission meeting minutes. Commission is asked to approve the draft April 19th, 2019 Commission meetings and May 17th, 2019 conference call minutes. Do we have a motion? Holly?
I move to approve the commission minutes for Friday, April 19, 2019, and the conference call on Friday, May 17, 2019.
Okay. Second? Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Atkinson and seconded by Commissioner Biddle. Having a fit moment. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Could I vote yes on the 17th and abstain on the other one since
Yes.
I wasn't here?
Yes. We'll note that for the record. Commissioner Wall abstained on the 17th?
No.
No, the 19th,
Yes.
right, and was present on the conference call because I remember that. Okay. Moving on. Exhibit B, Commercial Coastal Pelagic Fisheries. We get to have Karen back up. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair Finley, Director Melcher, Commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is Karen Braby. I'm the manager of the Marine Resources Program. And I am going to recommend some management measures for coastal pelagic species management for the next year, which is July 1st through June of next year, particularly related to sardine. Sardine is managed collaboratively with the federal system, and so the Pacific Fisheries Management Council has considered management measures for this species, made decisions, and then we at the state level reflect on those federal West Coast-wide management measures and adopt those and impose our own regulations at the state level that can be either consistent with or more conservative than the federal level. And so it's here that I am recommending today to adopt the federal recommendations, and I will walk you through where we are. So first, the Federal Fishery Management Plan, or FMP, for coastal pelagic species includes managed stocks, which are Pacific sardine and Pacific mackerel, monitored stocks, which are jack mackerel, market squid, northern anchovy, and then a number of other species that are either prohibited, like krill, or ecosystem component species that are in small numbers in the fishery. The managed species have stock assessments and harvest control rules in place through the FMP, and it is here that we have specific measures to take relative to sardine. Actually, before I move off of this, I think of note and somewhat related to my previous presentation on environmental conditions and changes on ocean species. This year, we have again seen a commercial fishery on market squid, which is an ephemeral, every once in a while we'll have a market squid fishery off of Oregon, but the core of that fishery is centered in Central California. And so in 2016, 2018, and now 2019, we have seen market squid landings. So that's just an interesting note. Going back to sardine, however, under the FMP, stock assessment has been done and revised the population assessment for the West Coast. And this graph shows you the stock assessment results from that update assessment. And you can see that in about 2006, 2007, we were at a peak in the population for sardine. And then it has declined precipitously since then. There are two lines on the graph across the horizontal axis. There's a yellow dashed line and a red dotted line. The yellow dashed line is the cutoff, and this is defined in the fishery management plan, and this is the level at which commercial directed fishing needs to be reevaluated and usually not allowed. And we've been in that regime for a number of years now. The red dotted line is the minimum stock size threshold, and that is the line over which the sardine stock is currently, and it defines that we are now in a status of overfishing and overfished in that species. And so being overfished, that triggers reaction from the council in order to rebuild that stock to the degree that the council and fishery management can do that. So we now are in a situation where at the federal level, we have a 2-year period of time to build a rebuilding plan for sardine, and so that process has started. The sardine stock is a relatively quick-lived species, and so in this period of time, we've had 5 years of decline, and in that time, the recruitment and regeneration of the species hasn't been enough to keep it above the MSST level or the cutoff level. This is not unusual in history. We have, in recent history, had a huge sardine boom in the 1940s that made Monterey's Cannery Row famous. We went into a decline. We've had a recent boom, and we are now in a state of decline. And if you look back further over history, these boom and bust cycles for sardine have happened and have occurred long before industrialized fishing was ever part of the West Coast story. So this is a natural cycle for sardine. It makes management of the sardine population, rebuilding of the sardine population complicated because we believe that there is a stronger effect of the environment and environmental conditions on the status of the stock than is fishing activity, which means that in managing fishing activity, we're not having a huge impact on the population status. So as such, with this understanding in hand, we, through the federal management arena and at the state management level, have allowed incidental and low-level catch of sardine, even in these periods of significant decline, with the philosophy that this is an economic benefit to allow fisheries that can possibly interact with and incidentally catch low levels of sardine. If we cut off that ability to catch those incidental catches, we're really hampering some of our other economic activities, and we're not getting a lot of ecosystem benefit from it either, because the fishing activity has less effect on that population. So with this in mind, this graph shows what the harvest limits have been, and it goes from having large limits during that peak period to, in 2014 and 15, getting to that place where the population got to around the cutoff level and our harvest limits for the fishery went way down. And now we're in this depressed decline period where harvest limits have been very small, and this has been in place for 5 years now. Those very small limits allow live bait fisheries to occur where they're catching bait to catch other fish. Small scale fisheries on sardine, including one that occurs in Central Oregon. Research on the fishery species so that we can have better information flowing into stock assessment and improve our methodologies, and then incidental harvest in other fisheries. So with that in mind, this is the table of management measures that was adopted at the federal level, and which I'm recommending today you adopt by future reference at the state management level, and these would be implemented starting July 1. The key numbers here are the allowable biological catch, which is 4,514 metric tons. That is the coastwide limit that is biologically acceptable under this scenario and this stock assessment and this situation. The annual catch limit is the same as that in this case, and there is an annual catch target, and that's a little bit lower. And that catch target is a soft cap that triggers a new management regime that's more constrained than what's allowable under this, what you might call de minimis, low-level incidental fishery regime that we're entering into. So the management measures to control harvest is that incidental limits for sardines in the CPS fisheries specifically can be no more than 20% of a landing. Incidental limits in non-CPS fisheries, non-coastal pelagic species fisheries, can be no more than 2 metric tons per trip. And then this live bait fishery that's directed on sardines but is intended to get small amounts of live sardines for fishing other species. If cumulatively that group of catchers collects more than 2,500 metric tons, they will be limited to 1 metric ton per trip. Or if the live bait fishery and all other CPS fisheries attain the annual catch target of 4,000 metric tons, then those 2 fisheries would be limited to 1 metric ton per trip. So there's just a check and balance kind of system in here that we're trying to allow small amounts of harvest and allow other fisheries that are very important to go on, but have the checks and balances so we can really neck down on the amount of harvest should there for some reason be a boom of incidental catch, for example. So my recommendation on behalf of my staff and in consistency with the federal regulations is to adopt these levels. We do not have published rules from the Pacific Fisheries Management Council yet, but we have no reason to believe they won't be consistent with the table I just showed you, and we expect those to be published later this month. I am happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners. Commissioner Atkinson.
Thank you, Karen. Some pretty fascinating data on what sardines do over thousands of years. What do you think is the cause of the current decline?
Thank you, Chair Finley and Commissioner Atkinson. I have no better answer than periodic cycling of that stock, and that is driven by environmental forcing, but I do not have a better answer than that. And unfortunately, I think that's largely the answer that we have collectively.
So it wasn't necessarily the blob or any really short-term issues, it's more of a long-term trend that just happens.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Spellbrink.
Excuse me, having been a commercial fisherman for all those years, I'm a little sensitive probably when I see things like under the sardine stock status, the result, overfished. I wish there was another classification because that kind of connotates that it was the fault of the fishery, and that really isn't the case, right? In this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Finley and Commissioner Spellbrink. That is a definition under the Magnuson-Stevenson's Act, is when it goes below a line, it is declared overfished. Overfishing is when, in a given year, if there is a catch limit, you go above that catch limit. And so those are just definitions in these systems. It doesn't mean that fishing is the presumed cause of the decline of sardine in this case.
Okay,
Right.
yep, thank you. Commissioner Wall?
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Forgive the out-of-context question, but could you just give me a description of where, if we adopt these, does that add layers of protection? It seems like it's a relatively alarming state that we're in. How much protection does this add, and what else, then if it isn't, then what else should we be doing?
Thank you, Chair Finley and Commissioner Wall. The current regime, and I'll just put this table back up, that is being adopted at the federal level and that I'm recommending to you is a very significant curtailment of the activity. Whether it's enough is for you to decide, but I do want to repeat what I said at the beginning, which is that once the federal stock assessment and the federal catch limit is set, then each state brings in those regulations into reference. And here, what I'm recommending is parallel, exactly the same. There is an opportunity to do something more conservative if the commission so chooses. Thank you.
So that begs the question. I know what you're being in conformity with the federal regulations, and you would recommend to us additional measures if you thought you had the data or we could actually affect the outcome, correct?
Thank you, Chair Finley. I think that's certainly part of it. The other part is that these catch limits in the last few years have resulted in lower catch than the limits. So we haven't taken the amount of fish that we have allowed ourselves to take. And so given that there doesn't seem to be a one-to-one correlation between curtailing fisheries and a benefit to the population, I think as managers, we're looking at this as allow the economic activity to go on to catch the other species that are in high population levels. Some of that helps make up for the fact that a number of fishery operators and industries relied on the sardine funding or the financial benefits from the sardine, and that's missing from our coastal economies. So that's all of these factors kind of play into this recommendation.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, final questions, thoughts, comments? Karen, thank you very much. I'm going to move on.
There's no use action. This is an action.
Pardon?
Oh, there's no public testimony, but this is.
Okay. There's no public testimony. Okay. So, Do I hear a motion? Commissioner Spellbrink.
I move to adopt the staff recommended rules for coastal pelagic species fisheries as proposed in attachment 3 and authorize the staff to incorporate the appropriate citations to the federal regulation when available.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Spellbrink and seconded by Commissioner Buckmaster. Any further discussion, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 6 commissioners present. Okay, Exhibit C. Mr. Whitaker, come on up, Don.
Good morning. Director Melcher, Chair Finley, members of the commission, welcome to our new commissioners. I'm Don Whitaker. I'm the ungulate coordinator here in Wildlife Division at the Salem headquarters office. I'm here this morning in regard to allocation of our special auction and raffle tags for the 2020 season. My game plan this morning is I'm going to spend a minute or two talking about our program, giving a program overview, what these tags mean and how we get to the end of the thing. And then I'm going to go through species by species. I'll give you a brief update on what happened for the 2019 year and our proposals for the 2020. The auction and raffle program here in the Department of Fish and Wildlife and several other states actually is a very critical source of funding for access and habitat projects and research and management of a number of our species. We basically have 2 main programs. We have the bighorn, pronghorn, and Rocky Mountain goat auction and raffle tags, and then we have the deer and elk auction and raffle tags that generate funds for the access and habitat program. Half of the tags are allocated for auction, and the process of deciding where those tags are auctioned, we have a process where 501c3 organizations apply to be a host for an auction tag, and they give us their priorities for which tag they want. And for both programs, we use the same application. Department staff here in Wildlife Division allocates to the venues for the bighorn, the pronghorn, and the Rocky Mountain goat tags. We'll select those auction organizations and venues, and then the Access and Habitat Board will allocate the deer and elk tags to the various organizations for their auction. As I mentioned, these are very critical funding sources. They're very popular because they provide an expanded hunt area. Oftentimes those are statewide, and they have an extended season length that runs from August through the end of November. And you see on the bottom graph, incidentally, with the 26 tags that we've now been providing for auction and raffle, 2019 was a very good year. It's the first year in the 33 years we've had these types of tags where we've broke $1 million worth of income in a single year on only 26 tags. Okay, I'll start with the Bighorn Sheep Program. This is the longest standing auction and raffle program we have within the department. It started in 1987. Starting with the auction first, in the 33 years we've had that, it's just under $3 million. And then 5 years later, we started with the raffle program for Bighorn Sheep. That picked up speed very quickly. In total, these 2 programs in that 33 years has generated about $4.4 million that's been statutorily dedicated for bighorn sheep research and management. For about the last 9 years or so, we're averaging almost $200,000 a year worth of income from just those 2 single tags. If we step down to just the year 2019, It was quite the year for bighorn sheep. Just in this single year, we've almost doubled our annual income. The 2019 auction tag sold at the Sheep Show in Reno with the Wild Sheep Foundation for $210,000. Now, for all of these tags, for the auction, the host organization receives or keeps 10% of the total auction price. That's to cover their costs, to cover some advertising, and they also, much of that funding is provided back to ODFW through their existing grant programs. So there's a income to the department, but essentially the total auction price is used for the species. Also a record this year was the raffle tag for bighorn sheep, just under 150,000. I think that record was about 12,000 over our highest record previously, which was last year. So we're doing really good. There's a lot of interest in bighorn sheep for the season and space, but it's also because it's a very limited species. Normally, there's not a lot of tags. For next year, staff is proposing that we maintain status quo, basically, one tag available for auction, one tag available for the raffle. The auction, we've historically been going to the Sheep Show in association with the National Wild Sheep Foundation. That's one of the premier auction events in the country, and it tends to generate extremely high prices for these special tags. And given that all of these tags' primary purpose is to generate funding for programs while providing a unique opportunity, we're going to continue for 2020 on that one. And the raffles will continue our process of drawing all of those in conjunction with the Oregon Hunters Association State Convention. This year it was in Lincoln City. Next year I think we're going back to Seven Feathers, but I have to confirm that. Swapping over to pronghorn antelope. This program was established 16 years ago, and for that we've generated just under $400,000 in that 16-year time frame. Right now we're averaging about $23,800 per year. For 2019, the Mule Deer Foundation Northern Oregon chapter in Clackamas sold that tag for $17,500 this year. That's about half of the record auction price for pronghorn. The raffle drawn at OHA generated a little more than $18,000. For 2020, exactly the same as bighorn sheep. We're going to request that we have one auction tag available and one raffle tag available. The applications from the organizations to host the auctions, literally the deadline for that was last week, so we're evaluating who gets these tags. We'll have a decision for the pronghorn tag by July, and then the remaining tag requests will be discussed by the Access and Habitat Board and allocated in July. Rocky Mountain Goat, that's where some of our surprises continued. This program was established at the same time that the pronghorn program was established. It's been around for 16 years, and in that time frame, it's generated a little bit more than $400,000 total, $435,000 in that time frame. We're averaging about $60,000 a year income, and this $60,000 a year income is for mostly the last 4 years, because the auction tag has only been in that program for 4 years. Because goats are one of our most limited hunting opportunities for our sportsmen. We started and ran 12 years where we just did the raffle program. We used that fund to improve our, we used those funds to improve our Rocky Mountain goat populations and our subsequent harvest opportunities, and brought those up to a level where we felt we could add another tag in there. And that second tag was the auction tag. This year the surprises continued. If we look at the Rocky Mountain goat tag nationally that are sold to auction, they tend to sell for about $8,000 to $12,000 or $14,000. In our 4 tags, we haven't sold one for less than $30,000. And this year, big surprise was that tag sold for $52,500. That gave us a net just in that one tag of $47,000, which was very encouraging for our program. Raffle tag also was a record year for Rocky Mountain Goat at just $28,000, almost $28,500. Exactly the same again. We'll decide on where we want to do it, but we're requesting one auction tag and one raffle tag for 2020. We'll have the host chosen by July, and then the raffle will be done at the state convention with OHA. For the Access and Habitat program, the A&H board is recommending that the commission approve 10 deer tags and 10 elk tags to raise funds for hunter access and wildlife habitat projects. These deer and elk auction tags have generated in their history over $7.25 million that have been used to increase our hunter access to private lands and to develop wildlife habitat projects, primarily on private lands. Proceeds from these auction and raffle tags can only be spent on projects recommended by the Access and Habitat Board and approved by the Commission. For the 2019 year, for those 26 tags, the raffle generated almost $220,000. The auction generated almost $350,000 for a total income of about $566,000. The 5-year, we're well above the 5-year average for both the auction and the raffle program in the Access and Habitat deer and elk tags. For 2020, in the auction program, we're recommending that 5 deer and 5 elk tags be allocated for the auction program. One of those deer tags and one of those elk tags is sold as a package deal under the governor's statewide combination. And then there's 4 statewide deer and 4 statewide auction tags. Excuse me. For the raffle tags, we're recommending an allocation of the same number of tags, 5 deer and 5 elk. Those tags would be allocated in the raffle program under another pair, governor's statewide combination deer and elk tag, 1 statewide deer and 3 regional deer tags, and then 1 statewide elk and 3 regional elk tags. In summary, we're asking that the commission authorize for 2020 26 special big game auction and raffle tags. 2 of those would be sheep, 2 pronghorn, 2 Rocky Mountain goat, 10 deer, and 10 elk tags for a total of 26 tags. 13 in the auction and 13 in the raffle. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions the commission might have. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Wall.
Thank you, Don. The access and habitat projects that the deer and elk tags pay for, can you talk about where that typically goes? It's habitat or it's access? And it looks, if I read your material right, the 2 this year happen to be for access. Is that typical? Does most of that money go for access, or is it over time better split than it looks like?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Wall, the Access and Habitat Board and regional boards within the Access and Habitat actually recommend the various projects. And it's been a mix over the years on how they allocate the money, and it does include both. There's been time periods when access was big push. There's been time periods when habitat's been a big push, and right now I think they're trying to equalize that a little bit and include some of both. I would be happy to go get you a copy of the annual Access and Habitat report. You could review that, and that would also have some information on and maps showing where the access projects are, where the habitat projects have been for the last biennium, I believe. We have those available, and I could get one quickly.
Thank you for the answer. I'm not sure I'm asking for more reading material right this minute.
Okay, yeah, you're probably drinking from a fire hose right now.
Thank you.
Did that address your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, we have no public testimony, so we'll proceed with the motion.
I move to approve the 2020 auction and raffle big game tag allocations as proposed by staff.
Okay,
Second.
it's been moved by Commissioner Atkinson and second by Commissioner Biddle. One last chance for discussion or comment. Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 6 commissioners present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Okay, Exhibit D, Access and Habitat Project Approval. Travis Schultz. Oh, no, we have Tom. Okay. Welcome, Tom.
Good morning, Chair Finley, members of the commission, Director Melcher. For the record, Tom Thornton, Game Program Manager. Yeah, Travis wasn't available today. He's been out for a while for medical, so I'll stand in for him, kind of see if we can get this covered. I'm here today with one access and habitat project proposal for commission consideration. There are 2 projects covered in your packets. One of those, the Rice Access Project, was recently pulled by the landowner. The remaining project, the lawn access area, has been in the ANH program since 2005. The area is located about 15 miles southeast of Burns, and it's just over 4,000 acres, composed of properties belonging to 4 different landowners. At $2 an acre, the project cost is just over $8,000 a year, and the total expenditure, if the project is approved for the 3 years of the proposal, would be just under $25,000. Cooperators contribute to this project primarily by posting signs, taking care of the gates, and in general, just kind of keeping an eye on the area. Much of the lawn access area is adjacent to the northern boundary of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. The area provides big game hunting for mule deer and pronghorn, and it's also one of the better access and habitat areas for game bird hunting. It has some of the best pheasant hunting in Harney County, and on wet years, which this could shape up to be, we'll see how it turns out, it also can have some very good to excellent waterfowl hunting. The staff recommendation is for approval of the funding for the project as recommended by the Access and Habitat Board. And that concludes my presentation. I can take questions now or after any public testimony.
I don't think we have any public testimony. So, commissioners, any questions for Tom? Commissioner Atkinson.
I'm assuming that all of the access area maps are available on our website, is that correct?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Atkinson, yeah, to the best of my knowledge, they are all available.
And can we get to those from the MyODFW?
I'm certain there's a way. I typically go in through the old system where you go to, at the bottom of the hunting pull down, it'll direct you to maps. It'll get you to where and how, and then you can get to maps that way.
Okay, thanks. I was also curious on the picture of all the women hunting, who they were and where that was.
That is a photograph that was taken at the lawn access area, and the ladies there are all now retired wildlife biologists from the department.
Cool.
Okay, any others? Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll
Commissioner
move
Wall.
approval of the recommendation.
Okay,
And I'll just note that it's the recommendation for the lawn access area, to be clear, because the draft motion does say that there's 2.
Thank you.
Yeah.
okay. So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Wall, seconded by Commissioner Atkinson. We'll just call the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 6 commissioners present. Thank you, Tom. Okay, next up, informational, big game regulation and simplification process. Nick Myatt. Welcome, Nick.
Morning. All right, good morning, Chair Finley, Commissioners, Director Melcher. For the record, my name is Nick Myatt. I am the project lead for the Big Game Hunting Review project for the department. And before I get started today, I wanted to provide a little background on our project for our new commissioners. Several years ago, we started an effort that we called Big Game Regulation Simplification in an effort to make our hunting regulations simpler and easier for hunters. We started the project, due to the complexity of the project, we split it up into 3 phases. The first, we took our Big Game Hunting Regulations document and did a editorial review and just improved the way we deliver that information to hunters. And then we did a review of the rules and statutes that provide the general hunting regulations, the area closures, weapons restrictions, things of that nature. And then the third and final phase, we've always said was going to be by far the most complex and take the longest to do, and that's reviewing all of the big game hunts themselves in our regulations. So things like our hunt boundaries, the dates, the types of hunting opportunities that we provide. So that brings us to where we're at today is doing that final stage. And we were earlier referring to this as Big Game Regulation Simplification, but when it came time to do it, we felt that there's just a need to do a complete big picture review of all of our big game hunting seasons in the states. We're calling it the Big Game Hunting Review, which is truly what it is the first time we've ever done this kind of big picture review of all of our big game hunts. So today wanted to just give a brief reminder of the goals of our project that we presented to the Commission in January. Wanted to give a quick update on a survey that we recently completed of Oregon's deer and elk hunters. Wanted to provide a summary of the proposed changes to big game hunts that have come out of this review, and wanted to spend a little time focusing on a few of the specific proposals that have generated the majority of public comment and interest at this point. Wanted to provide an overview of what we have done and plan on doing related to public outreach on the proposals, and then finally end with just a summary of the next steps with our review. So the 4 goals for the Big Game Hunting Review. First is to improve customer service through simpler big game hunting seasons, bag limits, boundaries, and associated regulations. The second is to allocate hunting opportunity fairly and consistent with hunter preference. Third is to review hunting season structure and allocation of hunting opportunity to promote hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation. And the final is just to continue to ensure that our hunting seasons meet biological objectives and maintain or improve hunter opportunity. And that was an important component of this project, is making sure that our proposals continue to maintain the hunting opportunity that we have now. So as we started this project, we felt it was going to be very important to truly understand what Oregon's hunters want and have a non-biased way of getting a snapshot of the preferences of Oregon's hunters. So we recently completed a survey of 1,000 Oregon resident deer hunters and 1,000 Oregon resident elk hunters. The survey we contracted Responsive Management, who's a firm that does this type of human dimension survey work, specializing in hunters and anglers, and they've worked for all 50 state fish and wildlife agencies over the last 30 years or so that they've been doing that work. And we have made arrangements for their director, Mark Duda, who we worked with on the survey. He's going to come to the September commission meeting and do an in-depth presentation of the survey results, and we'll have opportunity for questions and dialogue with the commission. We've recently completed the final survey report of the findings of that survey, and we anticipate early next week sending that out to the public and the support groups, and we'll provide that to the commissioners as well. So the results of the survey are largely going to be used to inform proposals and review that we're going to do over the next year. But we have used some of the results for some of the proposals that we're bringing forward to share with you today. So while I'm not going to get into real detailed results, I did just want to share a few highlights that were used in some of the proposals. The first is from the survey. It was very evident that Oregon's hunters they want to be able to go hunting. They really would like to hunt every year, be able to big game hunt. Hunters really placed a very high importance on getting the meat from hunting and the importance of spending time outdoors with friends and family. In general, hunters placed a much lower importance on harvesting a trophy animal. And we also looked at hunters out of our sample that ended up not going hunting, looked at why that was, and as with just about every other survey that's been done on this across the country, we found the number one constraint is just time. With all the other commitments people have in life, just trying to make the time to go hunting. And then finally, wanted to just share one slide of results related to weapon preference, because it helps inform some of the proposals with traditional archery equipment. So this is an example of one of the graphs that our report will provide. We asked a question of all weapons allowed, which one weapon would you most prefer to hunt with for deer on the left and elk on the right? And as you can see, the majority of hunters prefer to hunt with rifle, 78% for deer, 75% for elk. Next most popular is compound bow, 16% for deer, 20% for elk, followed by muzzleloader with 2% of hunters for deer and 3% for elk, and then traditional archery equipment with 1% for deer, 1% for elk. So over the last 6 months, we've been meeting with field staff around the state and Oregon State police officers, and we've had a project team working on developing proposals as well. And in your commission packet for this agenda item, attachment 2 has a written narrative summary explaining many of our proposals, and then attachment 3 has a spreadsheet of all of the individual changes that we're proposing at this time. But to summarize the majority of those proposals, we're taking 127 existing controlled hunts and consolidating those into 49 hunts. We're looking at expanding the dates of, or for 91 hunts, expanding the dates, making the dates simpler or more consistent with other hunts. For 85 hunts, we are proposing to expand the boundary of those hunts to either the entire wildlife management unit or just making those boundaries simpler or more consistent. For 57 hunts, looking at making the bag limits simpler or more consistent with other hunts. We're proposing 9 new controlled hunting opportunities. And finally, just wanted to make sure that the commission and the public understands is one of our goals of this project is related to maintaining or improving hunting opportunity. We do feel that the package of proposals that we are bringing forward meets that goal and is overall maintaining hunter opportunity. So now I wanted to focus on just a few of the proposals that have generated the majority of the public comments to date. First is related to Western Oregon deer bag limits. We currently have for our buck deer hunts a bag limit of 1 buck having not less than a forked antler, and for our antlerless deer hunts, 1 antlerless or spiked deer. This has been the bag limit in Western Oregon for over 60 years. We went back and looked in the regulations from 1955. We had this bag limit in all deer hunts statewide. In 1956, it changed in Eastern Oregon, but then looking back in the 70s, Eastern Oregon flipped back to this bag limit, and then I believe in 1981, Eastern Oregon went back to the bag limit it's now. So there's been some changes in Eastern Oregon, but in Western Oregon, this has been the bag limit for many decades. Even though it's been the bag limit for many decades, we believe there's no biological basis for this bag limit that we currently have. And we worry that there's potential that the bag limit could have negative impacts on the population. We also have enforcement concerns with hunters being able to differentiate a spike from a very small forked antler buck. So our proposal is to move to a bag limit of 1 buck with visible antler or 1 antlerless deer for our hunts in Western Oregon. This would make all of our deer bag limit language consistent statewide, so Eastern Oregon would match Western Oregon. I believe this bag limit is more biologically justified based on science. There's less of an enforcement concern. Instead of having to differentiate between antler point, hunters would just have to decide whether a deer does or does not have an antler. In this regulation change, we expect would slightly increase the level of harvest on blacktail deer in Western Oregon, but we believe our populations can handle that increased level of harvest. Currently, of our Western Oregon Wildlife Management units, all of the units except for 1 have been at or above our buck ratio targets for at least 2 of the last 3 years. And also that data is based primarily on our spotlight surveys that our biologists do. However, we have remote camera work that's been done in Southern Oregon, as well as more recent research that's been done by our Wildlife Research Unit using fecal DNA that shows that our spotlight surveys are underestimating our buck ratios, and the actual number of bucks on the ground is higher through those other methods. So the point there is just we believe that we can handle that increased level of harvest. The next group of proposals is related to consistency and equitability of hunting opportunity. The department's intent is to provide hunters the annual opportunity to hunt for or apply for 1 buck or either sex deer tag, for 1 antlerless deer tag, and for 1 elk tag. And in conducting this review, we found several areas where we're inconsistent in how we apply that intent and are providing a subset of hunters multiple opportunities outside that intent. And one of these inconsistencies is with several outliers in the 100 series, which is our controlled hunt series that is referred to in our big game regulations and commonly referred to by hunters as our buck deer series. And then in the 600 series, which is listed in our regulations as our antlerless deer series. So we're proposing in the 100 series, there are 4 hunts that we see as an outlier that have a antlerless deer bag limit in these hunts. All 4 of these are low tag number hunts in Central Oregon Bend area. We originally looked at moving those to the 600 series. However, after talking with our biologist about it, we're proposing to eliminate those 4 hunts due to population concerns with mule deer in that area. In the 600 series, we're proposing to move 3 one-deer bag limit hunts out of the 600 series into the 100 series. I think it's important to note that these hunts are very popular with hunters and take a high number of preference points to draw. We've received a lot of comments about the Umatilla National Wildlife Refuge hunt, which last year took 24 preference points to be able to draw that hunt. It is the hardest preference point related hunt in Oregon to draw. So because of this, while we're bringing this concept forward today, we want to provide hunters more notice about this change. So the proposal that we're bringing forward today is to implement this change for the 2021 hunting season. And then as part of that, we also, not for the Umatilla Refuge hunt, but for the other 2 hunts, we are proposing to significantly expand the area of those hunts and the number of tags within the hunts. Next proposal is related to elk distribution, damage, and hunting opportunity. As you probably know, elk populations have significantly increased on private agricultural lands in many portions of the state. One of the objectives of our project was to see if there's anything that we could be doing more to reduce elk populations on private land in those chronic damage areas and to shift elk populations more towards public land. Landowners in the department currently have a variety of tools to address elk damage, but we're primarily utilizing controlled hunts and our landowner damage program tags. But despite these tools, private land elk populations continue to increase in many areas. So one of those primary tools was controlled hunts, but our controlled hunts have several constraints for being able to deal with damage in these chronic damage areas. The first is that our controlled hunts have a May 15th application deadline. And what happens is in some areas, hunters must know up to 10 months in advance of going hunting that they have private land access in those damage areas and that elk are going to be present during that time period. And then the other issue we looked at is that in many of these areas, we have controlled hunts where the number of tags are limited. However, populations and issues in those areas warrant unlimited tags. The second primary tool that we utilize are the landowner damage program tags. We have been issuing over 4,000 of those tags each year across the state. Some of the constraints with those tags are that they're only valid on single properties. So for example, if a hunter was pursuing a herd of elk in an alfalfa field and they moved onto the neighbor's alfalfa field, that tag is only available on that one property that they're on, and they would not be able to pursue elk onto the neighboring property. These tags can only be issued at our offices when staff are present, so during weekdays and during business hours and when our field staff are out of the field and in the office. The tags are time intensive for landowners and staff to implement. And these tags are often issued when we already have existing controlled hunts in place, so we run into some conflicts with that. And then finally, this is getting back to some of those equitability issues. Most of the tags that are being issued today are exchanges and are being utilized as a second elk hunting opportunity by the hunters. So as an example, a hunter that has a general archery season tag that goes up in the mountains and hunts for several weeks during that season and is unsuccessful in filling their tag, later in the year they exchange that tag and use it as a damage tag on private land for damage problem. So our proposal is to pilot for the 2020 hunting season a general season elk damage tag. This would establish a new over-the-counter antlerless elk tag. It would be valid in our chronic elk damage areas that we identify and map annually. The intent is for these tags to replace landowner damage program tags during the designated areas and time periods. And then finally, to provide a tool where folks can immediately respond to damage problems, we're proposing that there will be no tag sale deadline for these tags. This is a map that shows the areas that we're proposing for these tags to be valid for the 2020 hunting season. The yellow is Western Oregon areas and the Columbia Basin elk de-emphasis area, where the tag would be valid from August 1st to March 31st. In the pink color areas are chronic elk damage areas in Northeast Oregon, where the tag would be valid from August 1st till November 30th, with the shorter season there intended to protect migratory elk that move across or into those areas during the wintering time period. The final proposal I wanted to touch on is related to traditional only archery hunting, so the use of long and recurve bows. We're proposing to expand traditional archery hunting opportunity in the state. And to do this, we want to maintain the one controlled deer hunt that we currently have and propose a new traditional only elk hunting opportunity in Eastern Oregon for the 2020 hunting season. We also want to commit to next year proposing one new traditional archery deer hunt and one new traditional archery elk hunt in Western Oregon that would go into effect if approved for the 2021 hunting season. And the reason that we're not coming forward with proposals this year for Western Oregon is we know that over the next year we want to review all Western Oregon late season hunting opportunities for all the different weapon types. And we didn't want to come forward with a proposal for a new hunt this year knowing that we might end up needing to change it for next year. But with this package of proposals, we would also like to address some of the complexity that exists in our current traditional only archery hunts. So our proposed changes are, we want to move to a set number of tags for our Trout Creek traditional archery deer hunt that we currently have. This hunt, while it's a controlled hunt, which implies a limited number of tags, it is the only hunt in the state where we have unlimited numbers of tags in a controlled hunt. There's currently between 50 and 80 hunters that go out on the ground and hunt during that hunt. However, about 300 hunters draw that tag each year. So we're proposing to move to a set number of tags for that hunt and set the number of tags at 300 tags for that hunt. The second proposal is to establish a new traditional archery elk hunt, with the hunt boundary being the North Fork John Day Wilderness. This hunt would have 50 tags, and the time period would be the 5 days immediately following the current general archery season, which is a very sought-after time for hunters. And this tag, like many of our others, would also be valid during the statewide general archery season. And then finally, we're proposing to simplify the general archery season by making the Murders Creek unit open to all archery equipment for the entire season. Currently in the Murders Creek unit during the general archery season, there's a small portion of the unit that is only open to traditional archery equipment for the first week of the season, and then it opens up to all archery equipment for the remainder of the season. It is, out of all of our general seasons in the state, it's the most complex regulation that we have. I know we have traditional archers of Oregon in the crowd today. They've been very engaged in our process and presented comments to the commission last year about this regulation and area. And we are hoping that with this package of proposals to expand traditional opportunity in the state, understand that our proposal to reduce the level of complexity in the Murders Creek unit. And I did just want to point out, make sure Commission realizes that with the proposed change, traditional archers would still be able to hunt in the Murders Creek unit, but it would be open to all archery equipment during that time period. So Just wanted to touch on some of the public outreach that we've done and planned. In January, presented informational introduction to the commission on our project, and also got information out to the sport groups and the public. In late May, a couple weeks ago, proposals went out to sport group leaders in the state, and we started doing public outreach on the proposals through news releases, social media. Our first post on Facebook related to this package of proposals, in the first 24 hours, we reached 52,000 people, and over 11,000 of those people engaged with the post by commenting, liking, or clicking on the link for more information. We'll continue that public outreach over the next 2 months. We'll be holding a series of public meetings around the state. I believe we have 18 scheduled. They're part of our annual big game regulations process. And then in August, the department will be finalizing our proposals that we'll bring forward to the commission in September for review and adoption. And then finally, just wanted to make sure everyone realizes this is our first round of proposed changes, and we are going to continue over the next year reviewing big game hunts. We anticipate potentially identifying more opportunities for consolidation of controlled hunts and making our controlled hunt boundaries simpler. We want to review the timing and duration of our primary general seasons. We want to review Western Oregon late season deer and elk hunting opportunities. Want to look at our approach to archery deer and elk seasons in the state. Want to review the allocation of hunting opportunity, allocation between youth versus adult hunts, and allocation of the various weapon type hunting opportunities that we have. And then finally, we want to look at our hunts through the lens of hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation, and see if there's anything else that we can be doing more to promote that agency priority. So with that, appreciate your time, and that's all I have for presentation today.
Okay. Thank you. We do have 7 people for public testimony, so
Good.
I'll call them up in groups of 3. So if you would retire.
Commissioner, or Chair Finley, could I ask a couple questions before he goes, or do you want to do those at the end? Okay. thank
Yeah,
you.
usually, if it's really
No, that's fine.
pertinent to something, but, okay, yeah, you have another opportunity. He'll be back.
Good.
We don't let him go far. Okay, Jim Akinson. Brian Core? Cook, okay. And Riley Savage. Okay, gentlemen. We'll start with you, Jim. We have 3 minutes. If you familiar yourself with the light system, when it goes red, that means we ask you to sum up. Okay, Jim.
Okay, thanks Chair Finley, Commissioners, Director Melcher. My name's Jim Akinson. I live in Enterprise, Oregon. I am the Senior Conservation Director for Oregon Hunters Association, which has a membership of around 11,000. And welcome to the 2 new commissioners, Bob and Mary. Look forward to more dialogue and interaction with you two. Welcome aboard. For starters, OHA commends ODFW and specifically Nick Myatt for an open and comprehensive effort to simplify and improve Oregon's big game hunting regulations, an important task, no doubt. And we also applaud the effort to increase opportunity through providing longer seasons, capitalize on game herd population abundance where occurring. And one other good thing I want to make mention of is, as an example, the consolidating of the Bear 700 series hunts. This is a win-win situation where 5 hunts are merged into 2. It brings about a lot of consistency on starting and ending dates, and also provides for a 2-bag limit of bears across the state. Those are the good. I do have some bad. This is kind of the good, the bad, and I guess I'll say the questionable. But keep in mind, I do feel that 80%, we feel as a board for OHA, 80% or better of these changes are good. But there's some that raise an eyebrow, so to speak. And I guess, and we have some concerns about unique lost opportunities. And one of those Nick made mention of, which is that very unique Umatilla 600 series any deer hunt, where there's a huge number of applicants putting in for very few tags, but this just hallmarks how important this is to the hunting community in our state. And I think the concept of getting rid of perhaps the most popular hunt in our state in a 1-year time frame is way too short. The other is this element of heritage. Part of OHA's mission is to preserve hunting heritage. And that's best demonstrated through some of the primitive weapon opportunities we have with both muzzleloaders and traditional archery equipment. And I think this situation with the Canyon Creek area needs another look-see. This hunt dates back to 1936. It's the second oldest traditional archery hunt in our state. And I think getting rid of that, even with those other things provided, needs another look-see. On the questionable aspect, I think these elk damage hunts are going to need some further review, and I think they're going to need input from hunters from around the state, which should occur during these district meetings. These meetings are very important. And I hope that there will be a summary brought forward from those meetings. And I guess in final comment, I didn't provide any official input from OHA at this time, in part because this is still playing out. And there's some questions that we want to see resolved before we express final input as the state's leading hunting organization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Brian?
Yes, sir. Chair Finley, Commissioners, Director Melcher, and our new team members. Brian Cook from Gaston, Oregon, not that far away from here. And I do work for OHA, but I'm speaking more for myself and friends that I'm in contact with, and mainly on the Umatilla 644A3 hunt. I personally have close friends, close family that are sitting at 20 plus points on this particular hunt. For me personally, I started hunting the Umatilla Wildlife Refuge in 1981, chasing birds, dreaming about being able to hunt out there someday. And the missed opportunity of other hunts that I have bypassed for this, it's just a little overwhelming for me to comprehend at this time after that. For me personally, 22 years, 22 preference points put into that. Mathematically, I should see that tag in the next 3 to 8 years, depending any changes. I don't see any good solutions to moving forward this other than just leaving it as it is as a 600 series hunt. You could possibly look at a 15 to 20 year fading out. The only other possibility I see is follow what happened with the 800 series hunts when they closed those and transferred them to the 600 series hunts, where our points follow us to the 100 series hunts for those hunters that have been applying for that hunt. And I think that would cause about a 4-year rip in the point pool for 100 series hunters too. Open to any questions with my last minute and 15 seconds.
Well, we're going to wait and question all of you, Brian, so thank you.
All right,
Stay
thank
there,
you.
though, stay there. Okay, Riley.
All right. Chair Finley, Director Melcher, Commissioners, my name is Riley Savage. I'm the president of the Traditional Archers of Oregon, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Canyon Creek Archery area, which Jim touched on, and so did Nick. Oregon has a unique bow hunting heritage, which is exemplified through the Traditional Archers of Oregon's Oregon Archery Heritage Museum, which is housed in the lobby right behind me right now. Oregon led the Western states by creating the Canyon Creek Archery Area in 1935, and from 1931 to 1991, there was even no firearms hunting allowed in the area. For many years, this provided an extended opportunity into mid-October for archery hunters as well. Rather than ignoring the history of this special place, TAO is proposing a broadened opportunity in which the Canyon Creek Archery Area becomes a general archery opportunity for traditional equipment only for the entire archery season. First and foremost, our reason is to hallmark the historical significance of Oregon archery hunting for future generations of archers willing to take the traditional challenge. Lengthening this season would fit with the project's goals of the Big Game Hunting Review currently in process. This simplification would help recruit new archers to the sport. 8 decades ago, the Oregon legislature and the Big Game Commission, or the Game Commission, recognized the challenges and difficulties of the archer's pursuit and provided a special opportunity for adventurous bowmen. We would like to pass this on so others can enjoy the archery hunts that we have. For traditional bow hunters, Oregon is the envy of many states across our nation. Unlike almost all states, we have a wide range of species to hunt over a varied landscape. Oregon has recognized this uniqueness with a very limited number of traditional equipment opportunities. We would like to see that increased in a logical manner that both protects the game resources and highlights our bow hunting heritage for current and future generations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Could I tag on to his last minute? Oh, I guess he's done.
No, we're going to wait and see if they ask you questions, Jim. That'll
Okay.
allow you to do that. Okay, commissioners, any questions? I have one. I'm trying to remember the reference for elk and deer going from landowner damage to a more general season. Need someone to help me out with that?
I'll take that. How this all came about?
Well, I was thinking about when we were up and we're working on the Chesnim and trying to shift elk from the private property off.
Right,
And so reduce some of these populations. We were talking about how to get them to move off.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and hunting being a major part of that tool.
Yeah. right.
And we've got some hallmark examples in our state of efforts. You know, you mentioned the Chesnim, that's one, Zumwalt Prairie. In the Columbia Basin, there's Cold Springs, tremendous effort there. And a new one that's getting established is the Gurdain area. And this involves department-led inclusion of all the stakeholders involved, the landowners, hunters, people that are affected by elk incursion into basically elk de-emphasis zones. So there's a lot of effort being made. It was a hot topic in the legislative session this last go-around. And I think in part what's manifested from that heat has been this general tag proposal.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's, why not? I guess in talking to the district biologists, Nick, and the DBs, they're willing to give this a try. So therefore, we are too. And I say questionable just because it's yet to be seen how it works. And
Well, that's a word I was looking for. It was the general tag proposal.
right,
Yeah. So how would that work on the private property, like in the Chesnim? Would there still be a fee to go on the private property from the landowner, or?
It's going to vary depending upon the landowner.
Okay.
Some already charge a nominal trespass fee. When they're coordinated, as has occurred in the Zumwalt and the Chesnim unit, it's less of an individual wanting to make some money off of it and more of okay, we're all going to charge $50 per hunter to make up for road damage. So I think this coordinated approach that the department's spearheading is really a good way to go.
Brian, your concern about the Umatilla unit and your 22 preference points,
Yes.
and you did mention in your remarks a phase-out that might work. Was that just a fleeting thought, or, over a time, do you think that has value by preserving preference points or the investment that families and groups have together and still moving to a different model?
Well, a phase out is more of a grasping motion, I guess. Mathematically, somebody who's sitting right now with 18 points, with the pools of people, I believe there was 1,563 first choice applicants last year for that hunt.
3 tags.
For 3 tags. And so when you do the math, even somebody that's got 15, 16 points may not ever use them. They've thrown away those years. So there's other tags within that hunt, or in the 600 series hunts, that are also looking at getting phased out. I don't know if a phase out would really work. I mean, I see, number one, to me, the best thing would be to leave it alone. And let it run its course. I mean, there's no biological reason to change the hunt. It's just more of trying to make it align with buck hunts under 100 series, the way I understand it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Buckmaster?
I
Thank you.
looked at the same things that you just questioned, and it looked to me like if you're only looking at 3 tags a year, then we could have as many as 500 hunters with 12 or more points as left hanging. And so the question I'll ask Nick when he comes back is the 2 options that I see, and you mentioned them both, Mr. Cook. One is that it's working fine, leave it as it is, and the other one is transferring points. And you alluded to some potential negative issues on that, and I want to ask Nick about them, but if you want to expand in any way on the negative, why that is a lesser solution than leaving it as it is, I'd like to hear it.
Well, and here again, this is more my personal opinion, but transferring points would be great. Right now, there's a lot of prime buck hunts across the state that are running 19, 20 points. You're going to put a lot of people in that race for those other prime hunts, and potentially for still going for the Umatilla. But if you have a person has 15 points for 100 series and 15 points for 600 series, and now those points are transferred, those people will then take the leaderboard on all the hunts. And I just foresee that if you do that, it's going to be I guess a 3 to 4 year melting point.
All right, thank you, panel.
Thank you.
I
Okay.
would just add, since, Mr. Chair, if I might,
Okay,
since
sure.
we're talking about the elk damage and the general season approach that Nick has laid out, I think Jim Akinson pointed out that elk damage is a major topic at the legislature. I think I would be willing to venture that it's probably the most major topic that we've been dealing with that doesn't have anything to do with current legislation. It's a big issue on private land, not just in isolated locations where we're currently dealing with it, but really almost in every corner of the state. I think you're going to hear tomorrow, I believe Representative Barreto is coming tomorrow under public forum, under the director's report, to talk to you about elk damage in his particular district, which is over in the Grand Ronde Valley. But it's one where we felt that it was more appropriate for us and the commission to take the lead on trying to develop solutions as opposed to having someone pass laws that will direct us as to what to do or tie your hands on what you can or cannot do. So we're trying to be proactive. It's a big issue, and we need to be creative. And of course, we don't want to have our staff being the ones going out and killing elk on private land. We want to use hunters. That's our model. Thank you.
Commissioner Buckmaster?
It's a little bit of a broken record, but we've talked about this through the years. The idea that we have this need on the damage control, and we have this other issue of how do we recruit, get new hunters, handicapped hunting, youth hunting to help solve the issue of how we can incorporate that. I hope that we can somehow focus on particular groups that we would like to see have opportunity, increased opportunity as we try and solve the problem. So.
Okay. Mr. Biddle?
This for you, Kurt. Do we have any idea on the over 4,000 of these elk damage tags, how many are filled that are issued?
Well, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Biddle, absolutely. Those folks do report under the mandatory reporting requirements. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I can't quote it for you here today, but we certainly have information on success rates for both LOP tags as well as non-LOP, be they general or controlled hunt tags.
Okay. All right. Mr. Endicott, I'm going to save you for the best and the last. And so I'm going to call up Robert Borland, Carson Brown, and Craig Starr. Okay, gentlemen, 3 minutes, red light, terminates your intellect. Okay.
About all it takes.
Mr. Borland, we'll start with you.
All right, Chair Finley, Director Melcher, members of the commission. My name is Robert Borland, or Bob, as everybody calls me as I get older. And I'm here, I'm the field governor for the Traditional Archers of Oregon, excuse me, I also have a cold. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the Trout Creek Traditional Archery season and the recommendation of it being limited to 300 tags. First off, the Traditional Archers of Oregon would like to applaud ODFW for the introduction and the success of the Trout Creek Traditional Archery season in Southwest Oregon. Over the years, there have been many bow hunters that make the annual pilgrimage to the desert to hunt big mule deer. We're able to introduce new hunters to the heritage of traditional archery through the availability of this opportunity. With that being said, the Traditional Archers of Oregon would like to see the opportunity broadened by changing the hunt to a general traditional season instead of the controlled hunt of 300 tags. When the hunt started, it was made an unlimited controlled hunt so the department could track the number of hunters taking advantage of this opportunity. Since that time, ODFW has introduced mandatory reporting, which accomplishes the same goal. The concern TAO has with limiting the tags and making it a controlled hunt is the recruitment of new hunters. As shown in the survey ODFW contracted, hunters want more general seasons. This is one of the big benefits of traditional archery. The limited range and low success rates allow for more opportunity. The availability to hunt the same area also helps with the reactivation and retention of younger hunters who are able to plan their hunt year after year. Another issue we see with restricting the opportunity of this hunt is the availability of non-resident tags. Several non-resident hunters travel from out of state every year to hunt this hunt, and with our low non-resident caps that exist in Oregon, that would severely limit their opportunity. The Traditional Archers of Oregon appreciate Nick and his team's work on the big game review process. We believe that making the Trout Creeks a traditional archery-only general season would further help simplify the regulations even more than his current proposal of limiting the hunt to 300 tags. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown?
Chair Finley, Commissioners, Director Melcher. First, my name is Carson Brown from Staten, Oregon, and the Secretary of Traditional Archers of Oregon. And I'd like to talk about the rise in popularity of archery and the growth in traditional bow hunting as an opportunity. So, I'd first like to thank Nick Myatt and his team for proposing new traditional archery opportunities in the form of the North Fork John Day Extension and the Deer North West Side archery opportunities to be determined. These are sure to be a success from both the hunter and management perspectives. While we are encouraged by this tip of the hat recognition these hunts provide, we do feel that they fall short in terms of the amount of opportunity that these provide. So we're looking for a little more opportunity to better reflect the growth in traditional bow hunting that we see. So it's really clear to me, being involved in the archery industry and our organization, that there's a lot of growth occurring right now. So here's some examples that try and get you to see what I'm seeing. There's some articles here I cite, some excerpts. Remy Warren, part of the Meat Eater crew, hangs around with Steve Rennell, and they're, kind of getting some of these young professionals that have never hunted before out hunting. Remy Warren talks about his take on traditional archery. He's encouraging people to pick up a bow and arrow to take that challenge. There's another article here on Wide Open Spaces titled, "You Can Get Behind the Rebirth of Traditional Archery." I think this quote sums it up best. "There's a wave of momentum flowing through the outdoors, and it's not tech-driven or newfangled, if you can believe it. It's traditional archery." They go on to say, "The more people that pick up a traditional bow and arrow and discover their appeal, the more will preserve the foundation of archery as we know it." If you go to the Filson website, you guys are all familiar with Filson and the outdoor clothing company based in Seattle. If you go to their hunting page, you'll see a traditional bow hunter, a guy in his late 30s with a long bow and wood arrows. And that's what Filson's marketers have chosen to represent their hunting line of clothing. I think that's something to take note of. Social media trends. If you look at, all the young hunters want to be Insta famous, right? And get sponsored by some industry so-and-so to go hunt all the time, right? That's the dream of a young hunter. Some of the most successful hunters in that social media scene are making a splash by publicizing their switch from modern archery technology to traditional archery technology. And so I'm going to skip what I wrote down here. I would like to point out that, so Nick pointed out that there's only 1% of folks that would choose to pick up a longbow and recurve. Like, who's in their right mind to try and kill an animal with a recurve or a longbow? But that's given the current situation, the current opportunities available to hunters out there right now. And I'd also like to point out that survey was of current hunters. And I think if we surveyed non-hunters, which would be important if we're looking at recruitment, we would find a higher percentage of people that would be interested in picking up traditional archery equipment.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Starr, and we have your notes were handed to us.
Good. Chair Finley, Commissioners, Director Melcher, my name's Craig Starr. I live at 2105 Desiree Place in Lebanon. I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment to you today on the big game hunting proposals. I'm going to talk about a couple of the specific proposals and then one lack of a proposal. I strongly support the proposal to finally eliminate the requirement to have a controlled Ochiko unit archery elk tag in order to hunt deer in that unit, and to replace that requirement with a controlled archery deer hunt, number 137R. That's something that bow hunters that I've talked to have been after for years. I'm opposed to the proposal to eliminate the North Winnehaw unit archery whitetail hunt, 156R2, unless a bow hunting opportunity is provided with the consolidation into the new Grand Ron muzzleloader hunt. Bow hunters argued for years for a late season whitetail hunt similar to the late muzzleloader hunts, even though what ODFW finally provided by Hunt 156R2 hardly qualifies as that. Now, after only a few seasons, the sole late season archery whitetail hunt is proposed for elimination. If 152M were made a short range weapon hunt, including use of the bow and arrow with muzzleloaders, that hunt could serve to provide bow hunters with a continuing late season hunt as an alternative to 156R2. It's been my impression, and in fact some of the one of the slides here today indicated that a major part of the current big game hunting regulation review was to try to have more consistency in the hunting regulations. I note that ODFW proposes to create 3 new late-season mule deer hunts and establish limits on LOP tags for those hunts. It seems completely unreasonable that ODFW chooses to create LOP limits on new hunts without addressing the few existing special hunt outliers, including the late Metolius archery buck hunt 139R, for which LOP limits still do not exist. That hunt is one of the most popular hunts in Oregon, even though bow hunters only number about 1/5 the number of firearms hunters. And I'll just leave it at that. The rest of my statement kind of provides some statistical details
Yes.
regarding the impact of the inconsistency of not addressing LOP limits.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, commissioners, any questions, these gentlemen? Commissioner Atkinson.
I just wanted to say to Carson, thank you for that interesting information about the uptick in interest in traditional archery. I was not aware of all of those different, particularly young people that were really starting to focus back on traditional archery as a new and exciting challenge, and the social media aspect. I think that's really heartening and exciting, because that could be a huge growth potential for our 3Rs, trying to get more people into hunting, and very exciting to see.
I'm going to follow up on that, and then Commissioner Wall. I was going to ask you the same thing. I read a lot about millennials, and one of the things I read about is that they're seeking authenticity. You know, and is that what you're seeing? Are a lot of these people within that millennial group that you're seeing?
Yeah, not just millennials. I think people
Okay.
these days, a lot of people are looking for something
broader
simpler
than
that has
that.
a deeper connection, heritage, and
Okay.
attached to it. And a lot of people are looking for a clean source of food, and
Yeah.
they're trying to be socially responsible, ethical consumers, but they don't want to give up meat. So they're turning their attention towards hunting. They think they can actually go kill someone with a long-gun reeker, but it'll get them into hunting.
Well,
Figure it out.
they may surprise themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get them in.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Wall.
Actually, my question was along the same lines. I'm always looking at the surveys to see if we ask different people, will we get different responses, and how do we do that? And I think you've answered it, unless there's anything else you could add about what kind of responses we might be missing, if you will, and what you think we would hear, what kind of perspectives are we going to get if we ask different people, because that's pretty broad.
Yes, I just think it's important to note that, you know, it might be important in the next round of surveys to reach out to the folks that don't already hunt and see what could bring them in, what they would be interested in, how would they, you know, try out hunting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else, commissioners? Thank you, panel. Mr. Endicott. You went to a lot of work to provide this handout for all of us. Thank you for that. And because of the depth of your research and your willingness to share it, give you 5 minutes.
Okay, appreciate it. Chair Finley, Director Melcher, for the record, members of the commission, new members, appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you. For the record, my name's Wayne Endicott. I live in Springfield, Oregon. I'm Vice President of Oregon Bow Hunters, founder of Oregon Outdoor Council. I am here just not representing any of those groups today. So what I have before you is just what I put together, you know, as far as concepts. I can't tell you how excited I am that there is a crack in the door with this, what started as a recruitment, you know, simplification process headed up by Nick Myatt. Nick's a fine man for doing this process. I think he's the right man for the job. Excited about that process. The only thing I was questioning was just the amount of public involvement in the beginning, and what you see with my concepts that I provided you. You're probably wondering why, you know, I'm anywhere qualified to bring all these concepts, but for the last 30 years I've stood behind
a retail archery counter, and there's not probably a day that's gone by that all the passionate individuals that are user group haven't come in and shared, basic management concepts, conservation concepts. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt was a user for the North American, he was basically the father of North American hunting model, and he was part of the user group, and that's what I represent as part of the user group, is that these concepts, and I'm gonna just very, very quickly go over these for, time restraint, and I'm gonna touch on the ones I'm pretty passionate about, but I wanna also say that 80% of these are not mine. I'm just a good listener. I stand behind a counter and I listen, and I'm like, my gosh, that's a great idea, and I just log it away. And so that's what I'm here today to present to you. So there's a big problem with bighorn sheep tags, I feel, and goat tags. So we have a once in a lifetime tag, and that tag can be issued only once, and it's the most highly sought after tags we have in the state of Oregon. And you cannot blame the alpha male in the family for putting everybody that has a pulse in the family in for a bighorn sheep tag for $8. And so there's a simple process to eliminate this, is just simply have to put up all the money for the tag. And we just had another individual that, had a separation and divorce from his wife, who's also being prosecuted and was just prosecuted for poaching because he was a trigger puller when his wife, who was non-hunter, drew the sheep tag. And OSP actually has videos that they used to advertise of this same abuse process at all the sporting shows of the individual that did the same thing with his wife and shot the sheep while the fisherman in the Deschutes River was not a fisherman but OSP officer. And so this can be easily solved by just simply putting up all the money for the tag. I know it's legislative, I know it's not administrative rule, we have to go to legislature with it, but we need to start the wheels turning on this. And something that's so highly sought after as a sheep tag, this should be done. Rolling on to something else I'm very passionate about, mule deer. I grew up in this state. My dad took me to Steens Mountains when I was 12 years old, and I'm 58 years old now. I've seen a big paradigm shift. We are in trouble on mule deer. $10 per 100 does. We have failed miserably to produce mule deer. And I formed Oregon Outdoor Council with the idea that we could have some active management on predators. I'm tired of the predator issue. I'm tired of discussing it. 90% of what I had for response on all my concepts that I posted on social media, which you see the polls from social media, was everybody's, well, let's deal with predators. Well, our hands are tied on it. Let's put our finger on what we can do, and that is management. So the core mule deer recovery plan, if you see, there's a map there. It goes through Paulina, Silvies, Beulah, through the center of the state. We have a good seed crop of mule deer there. $10 per 100 does, with one buck only being able to sire 30 does at a time. We are failing. When you take Beulah, for example, we have Beulah and we have just basically 200 immature or bucks killed a year by rifle, of which 80 or 90% are immature. We're going into the winter with a very high lack of mature bucks on the landscape. What this would do the first time would be a weapon rotation hunt. And the weapon rotation would go archery, muzzleloader, rifle. It would cut the tags, and what it would do is it would service a spill out of bucks into those neighboring units. And it's proven, Allburn study proved that spawning rates are directly tied to the amount of sires that are on the landscape. Doe comes into heat once, she's bred, and if she comes into heat again, if there's not an active sire, she's not bred again. Twins and triplets are directly tied to the amount of bucks we have on the landscape. It's proven. And so that is, I'm very passionate about this. It's a different preference point system, and it would add very much value to all the other units surrounding it. Just really quickly, elk, we've had a lot of discussion about damage. There's a lot of, there's two things with the elk that is a problem. One, we have August period youth hunts where we're killing elk with, nursing calves. This is inhumane. This is disguised as a youth hunt. It should be eliminated. We can't kill predators. We can't kill cougar with spotted kittens. We can't kill bears with newborn cubs. we should not be killing our prize animal and disguising it a use hunt. If my father would have did that to me and I shot a cow and it had a calf standing there bawling as we were butchering and breaking down this elk, I would have never hunted a day in my life, and I would have said I would have had nothing to do with this. And I know this has happened. I've seen too many posts on social media of lactating cows with a child sitting there holding it. And I've been involved, with too many hunts to know that what took place there wasn't pretty. That needs to be eliminated. The other part is the North American hunting model mentions whole outline of what fair chase is. I'm sorry, damage hunts do not qualify for fair chase. Hunting wintering elk when we've had overgrazing on the public, they're forced down by the winter and they're in private lands, disguising that as a fair chase model and having individuals hunt those when they're trying to survive the winter, hunting those elk and killing them. And I've heard nothing but, I've got full of texts and emails of nothing but abuse. And the one 600-pound gorilla in the room, it's not a $50 trespass fee. I have emails I can forward you of $1,500 to $2,500 as the access fee. You want to remove damage? Remove the access fee. If the access fee is not allowed, I guarantee you 70–80% of the damage complaints go away. And so that's, and I'm well out of time, and I appreciate the opportunity. I am excited about this process. Kurt well knows that for years I've just been excited about management concepts and the way we can make Oregon better. And there's nobody more passionate about it than the user group. And there's nobody more that needs to be more involved with this than the user group. I mean, there's not a lot of biologists that hunt and fish as actively as everybody that is my customers. And they are the ones that have always been the lead on this, from Theodore Roosevelt on down, as far as the conservationists, and we're conservation minded. We want nothing more than to make Oregon fabulous resource for game. And I really appreciate your time. And Michael, I appreciate you giving me the extra time to discuss this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Commissioners, there was some interesting proposals there. Anyone care to have a question? Commissioner Biddle.
I'd like to have some one-on-one time with you after we're done. Are you still going to be here?
Yes,
Okay.
I will, Jim.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Nick. Come back up, please, and I don't know. You got too many compliments. We got to be suspicious of what you did. Okay, commissioners. Questions? Comments? Commissioner Wall.
A quick question. Could you give a short description of the difference between the damage program hunts and the controlled hunts?
All right, Chair Finley, Commissioner Wall. So our what we refer to as controlled hunt is a limited number of tags that we provide, and a hunter has to, by May 15th each year, apply for basically like a lottery style for that limited number of tags. So that's what we refer to as controlled hunt. You also hear us talk about a general season. That's where there's no limit on the number of tags that we provide, and a hunter, typically before the start date of that hunt, can just go online or to a licensed agent and purchase a tag, and they don't have to apply. And then our damage program tags, those are if a landowner is having presently occurring damage, they can come into our office and work with our biologist, and our biologists have the ability to right there issue up to 5 tags, antlerless elk tags at a time, to address that damage situation.
Thank you. And is the pinch point the bios time?
That's one of them. It's a lot of time for the biologist, but I think more importantly is it takes the landowner coming in, meeting with our staff, providing a list of the names of hunters, having to issue that tag, And a lot of times in these damage areas, we will issue up to 5 tags at a time, but some of them we continue throughout the August to March timeframe, continue to issue tags in those areas. And the question came up about the harvest success rate on, so just in general numbers, I mentioned that we issue over 4,000 of those tags annually. And generally speaking, we have a success. We fill about 2,300 of those 4,000 tags. So typically a pretty high success rate, higher than most of our other controlled type elk hunting opportunities.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions. You want me to keep going, or?
Please do.
Where, in the 4 goals, I think you had 4 at the start, where are the biological objectives? Where would I go to find those?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Wall, so you mean out of the goals for our project where
Yes.
we kind of address the biological side of things?
Yeah, the objectives.
So our, so goal number 4, one of the parts of that goal is that our hunting seasons and big game hunts continue to meet biological objectives.
Right.
So part of the reason we put that goal in there is to make sure commission and the public know that, you know, the underlying basis of these hunts are the biological reasons behind them. And in the name of making things simpler, we're not going to ignore the biology. So also what we may be asking is we set biological objectives
Right.
for elk hunts and deer hunts, and those are, for certain species, those are adopted by the commission and captured in our elk plans and deer plans. Does that answer your question?
That did, especially the last part of it. And one last question. When you're considering all of these programs, how are you considering habitat loss with the increased wildfires and the longer summers? How are you factoring those in?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Wall, so that has been in our review. The warming, drier climate has been a topic of discussion that has come up quite regularly, particularly related to not as much about habitat loss and fires, but more related to the timing of our primary seasons. With archery season starting typically in the 3rd week or so of August, we continue to have more conflicts with fire seasons and large fires and closures, particularly of industrial timberlands. And so that's an issue that we're going to be talking about more over the next year as we review our general seasons and looking at those trends. That's also part of the proposals that we have for extending our bighorn sheep seasons, some of our pronghorn seasons, making them longer, is to get them, provide hunters the opportunity to not hunt when we keep running into conflicts with big fires and smoke, but also potentially a more desirable time of the year when it's not almost 100 degrees out on the landscape.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Buckmaster?
Well, Nick, you heard me comment on the issue of the 600 hunts being moved to 100, comments by Mr. Cook. So obviously that's the one that I got the most feedback on, people actually coming to my house and to talk about. So they were neighbors, they walked, they didn't stalk me or anything, but that was, do you have a compelling reason to, I mean, the preference seems to be, why don't we leave well enough alone? If you have a compelling reason to change it, I'd like to hear it, and if so, then how can we deal with the point issue?
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I guess the reasoning is what I've presented is, you know, part of our charge is looking for outliers and inconsistencies. One of those was having a what is seen as a buck deer hunt in our antlerless deer series.
But you have those in the 200 series, don't you? Multiple, different, that's not a single sex in the 200 series, is it?
Commissioner Buckmaster, no, the 200 series is our only elk series. So it was really, the justification is trying to meet that intent of just providing one buck hunting opportunity in a year. But I did want to touch on, one of the things that came up was related to preference points and potential for moving those preference points to the 100 series. And did want to make sure the commission knows that our preference would be to leave the hunts in the 600 series if other than the option of moving preference points from the 600 to the 100 series if those hunts were moved.
So what I hear you saying is, if you were being asked, given the alternative of moving the points with the hunts, you would rather leave the hunts where they are?
Yes, that is correct.
That's fine. Okay, and it is my opinion that that's what we ought to do then.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Spelberg.
Okay, let's see, I think Wayne brought up something, he covered so much that I might have missed some of it, but about paying for the tags ahead of time was that to slow down the number of applicants or anyway, but I guess one thing I was thinking, I'm not sure this is the time or place, but you know, Idaho has a lot of my money and I've had very few of their elk tags. So, you know, I have to buy a license to apply for an elk tag in Idaho. And has that been, like I say, I'm not sure this is the place to talk about it, but has that been talked about or considered here at all?
Commissioner, or Chair Finley, Commissioner Spelberg, it has not come up in part of our review process. Just off the cuff, one thing that I think if we were looking at it under the lens of our project, one of our concerns may be the barrier to entry to be able to apply, of having to put that money up front for some hunters. But has not been a topic of review, and maybe something else that somebody else from the department wants to discuss.
Director?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would just add to Nick's response that there was a time in Oregon where you had to prepay for your tags in advance before the draw, and then you got a refund. For us, refunds are a big deal. It's costly to administer and manage, but there's also a whole set of rules and state rules and regulations associated with what we have to do if we can't find the person, you know, the checks get returned. It is just, I mean, we went away from that, you know, 20 years ago to lower the administrative burden associated with controlled hunt.
And Idaho fixed that by not giving refunds.
Yeah. Well, that'd be an option too, but that would be a very controversial option.
Chair Finley?
Yes, Commissioner Buckman.
This would be to you. Since we're going to move forward in this process, we're going to leave he's got my opinion, but he has no idea if that opinion is shared by the majority of the commissioners on the 600 hunt. Is there, in order to help him, can we do a poll?
Well, let's just go right down the list. Holly, how do you feel about that?
I think people that have those big preference points, we should not abandon them in those points. I don't see that it matters if we have some exceptions in the 600 series and leave them as is.
Commissioner Biddle?
I agree.
I don't have an opinion on this one yet.
Okay,
Agreed.
okay. Got enough?
Okay, thank you.
Did that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Atkinson?
You know, several people have brought up regarding the traditional hunts, the potential of being general hunts rather than controlled. And I see that that's one of the strategies that you were looking at on identifying existing controlled hunt areas where a general season approach could improve the ability to meet objectives and vice versa. In comparing archery hunts versus rifle hunts, a rifle hunt is typically 5 to 7 days or 8 days. The archery season is 4 weeks long. So it seems like the archery season is really conducive to being better off being a general hunt than a controlled, because for a rifle hunter, they're not going to spend 2 days in one unit and then 2 days in another unit hunting. They'll select a unit and that's where they hunt. But for bow hunters, they have 4 weeks to hunt. And probably, I'm guessing, folks that live in Portland are not going to travel to the trout creeks and spend all month hunting there. And so if that's a controlled hunt and that's their only hunt, it really decreases their hunting opportunity. So I would like to see you look at that concept of maximizing general hunts for archery seasons, and particularly these traditional archery hunts, but I think even broader than that, might provide more opportunity for hunters to spend more days in the field without adversely impacting harvest levels.
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Aikenson, so to touch specifically on the Trout Creeks hunt as well as the new elk hunt that we're proposing. So while it is a controlled hunt, it's what we refer to as a transportable tag. So that tag is also valid during the general season. So if someone has that tag, they can also hunt elsewhere during the general archery season. And the other thing I did I'm sure you're aware, but want to make sure the commission's aware, is traditional archery hunters and other archery hunters can currently hunt in the general archery season, which is in the overwhelming majority of the state right now is general archery season for deer and elk. So they do have the ability for, in Western Oregon, we have late season archery opportunities as well.
Okay, I actually didn't know that, so that was a good clarification. So with the Canyon Creek area, if that was continued and expanded to be during the entire season, would that be the same type of hunt? The controlled, but with the portability?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Aikenson, so while we don't have a proposal for that right now, did get brought up by the traditional archers. It right now is a general season, and the proposal that they've brought up is to extend that from, right now it's only for 1 week of the season, be to extend that for the whole week of the season. And those are, we would have to look at that of whether it would be maintained as a general season, just expanded for that full time, or as a unique controlled hunting opportunity.
Well, given the big heritage background of that Canyon Creek area and the fact that it is only 4% of the unit, what would be the problem with having that be a traditional only? I mean, I didn't see from the information you provided that it was limiting other archery hunters. If it's 4% of one unit within the whole state, and I think historically people know about Canyon Creek anyway, so it wouldn't be like that anybody would be surprised that they couldn't go hunt there if they didn't have traditional equipment. It seems like there's more value to maintaining that history than the value of being simpler.
And Chair Finley, Commissioner Aikenson, I think when we talked about this quite a bit in our review team. And one of the issues that we were looking at is our general seasons are really our bread and butter, where a lot of the hunting opportunity is, and probably our greatest recruitment tool are our general seasons. And anything that we can do to make them simpler and easier for hunters to understand. If you look at the regulations right now, because of that small Canyon Creek area, it takes up the better part of a third of a page in our general season tables. There's a paragraph written description defining the boundary area for it. So that's why we came up with the recommendation we did, is in an effort to just make our general season descriptions simpler, and also we're looking at just the proportion of weighing the complexity of the regulation versus the amount of users. The traditional archers, we have, as we showed, 1% are preferring to use traditional archery equipment. So we're just weighing, is the amount of complication in the regulations worth having that continue there. And also, we looked at the fact that the traditional archers can continue to hunt in that area without that regulation. They can hunt, traditional archers can hunt in almost every hunting opportunity we have in Oregon right now, except muzzleloader season. They can hunt during the general archery season across the state. They can hunt during our regular general, any weapons seasons. So those were some of the things that we considered in our decision for that recommendation.
Well, I would just encourage you to reconsider about Canyon Creek, and if anything, if you're concerned about how much space it takes in the regulations, what about the whole Strawberry Mountain Wilderness?
Okay.
Oh, I had one other thing.
Okay.
Different topic. I was wondering on the general season damage tags, how does that work with landowners saying, yes, you can hunt on my property, but you can't on the next property? How would the hunters address that, and are the landowners in support of this general tag?
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Atkinson, this tag would operate just like our other general season tags or controlled hunt tags, where hunters would be responsible for having permission to hunt on private land. I think this versus, say, a damage program tags give the hunter greater flexibility to be able to get permission to hunt on multiple private landowners. But ultimately, success of using this tag to address chronic damage situation is going to be dependent on landowners providing access for hunters.
Okay, thanks.
And I did just remember another comment I wanted to make related to that from the discussion was the landowner damage program tags right now are not included in our mandatory reporting system. So when a hunter gets issued a landowner damage tag, they have to call in and report to our biologist on their harvest, and very few of them do that. Our biologists call them at the end of the season and follow up for that reporting on there. So just want to make sure aware that it's not part of our reporting system. Whereas these new tags that we're proposing would be part of the mandatory reporting system.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wall? You don't have any?
Question?
Just for the record, I want to make sure that I agreed with Commissioner Buckmaster on his suggestion, although it pained me. Okay.
What, just the agreement?
Well, I'll make one that you
Okay.
can't
All right.
possibly agree
The
with.
floor is yours.
That's not hard.
So the idea on, we had some testimony that talked about some new ways of looking at damage control, not allowing access fees. The idea that damage control tags would be available and could be purchased and then could be filled on a request from a landowner for that I have damage, I would like X number of, whatever it is, numbers of animals removed. We have a core of people holding controlled damage tags that can be accessed to allow to come on the property and remove elk. That changes the whole paradigm of it being a controlled by the landowner to a core of paid hunters holding a specialized tag that they can use in damage control situations. Has that ever been discussed?
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I apologize, I'm not following. I think where I'm getting confused is talking about paid hunters.
Well, no, not a hunter has paid and bought a tag.
Yes.
He's bought a damage control,
general
a special designated damage control tag.
Yes.
Now, the only way he can fill that tag is if there is a damage control situation that he can either call or he can be, that's on our website. We do, that's where that can be filled.
Yes.
The landowner with damage then can call and say, can work with their local staff and say, we have this many, we can offer these kind of hunts. I like the idea of shifting the paradigm somewhat because, like one of our people, one of the people who testified, sorry, I can't remember the name, said this whole idea of it turning into a money issue and a paid access issue, as what impact that might have on the number of damage control complaints we have. I think there are ways of maybe making that change. So
That was Mr. Endicott.
thank you, Mr. Endicott. I apologize for not jotting it down.
Okay. Any more? Okay. Thank you very much, Nick. We do appreciate all your work. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the end to our formal commission agenda. We are going to meet now in executive session. I'll read a statement. It's usually for litigation discussion or property acquisition or other matters that are exempt by state statute. So we're going to have lunch and then have this session. We will come back in here 1 o'clock, maybe 1:10. All we'll do is bang the gavel and adjourn the meeting. So there's no other thing to stay around for. I don't want you to waste your time. So now you know. Okay, the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission will meet in executive session. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660, parens 2, parens F, which allows the commission to meet in executive session to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Keep the roar down, please. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to the public meeting and adjourn.
Thank you for that.
I think I learned not to do that.
Don't tell them until you've done it.